Episode of Client Server's Talking Tech. My name is Michael Oliver, and I'm the head of marketing at Client Server. And every time we have one of our episodes here at Talking Tech, we explore some of the big issues that are shaping the tech sector, not just in the UK, but around the world as well. And at the moment, if you have any interest in hiring or any interest in the job market within the technology space, there's one word that has been coming to mind almost constantly. It's freeze. Hiring freezes, hiring freezes, hiring freezes. That seems to be the big word of the day. And the question is, like, while big tech has either started rescinding offers or putting hiring on pause, what else is happening with the smaller players in the market? Well, we've got the man who's able to give us the numbers and give us the perspective on what is happening across the UK. His name is Dom Harvey. He is the sales director at Total Jobs. Hello, Dom.
Hello, everybody.
Ooh. Let's just kind of look at the tail of the tape here. So, Alphabet, the company that owns Google, slowing pace of hiring. It's the slowest hiring pace since 2022. Amazon is adding jobs at the slowest rate since 2009. Apple are also slowing their hiring. Meta slashed plans to hire engineers by 30%. Microsoft have an indefinite hiring freeze. Netflix, a well publicized round of layoffs. Tesla, Mr. Elon Musk, you might have heard of this guy, said that layoffs would be necessary to keep things going. And even Twitter, are putting in place a hiring freeze and rescinding job offers across the piece. If anyone is thinking about big tech, they're thinking, oh God, they're not hiring engineers, not hiring developers at all. And that's where big tech goes, that ripple effect obviously follows. Don, what's the sense that you're seeing in the UK market right now? Is this having a big impact, or is it just a little bit of fear and reservation that the big players are kind of, they're making their moves, they're pulling their offers, and just kind of the market's just assessing where it is?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the latter. And I think the really important differentiation is about big tech stocks and stock prices and how that's affecting hiring. And then there's the standard recruiting requirements of many companies, public sector companies throughout certainly the UK. And actually, when you look at the number of jobs being posted, I think there were 2 million posted. It depends where you look. May 21 to 22. TechNation says 1 in 6 of all job postings are in the tech domain. Now that domain has broadened in scope, I think, over the last 5 years, and that, if anything, the hiring requirement has gone up. So I think it's really important to differentiate from stock market fluctuations and how that impacts massive companies like Alphabet. How the waning of COVID virus has affected the big winners, who were Netflix, Peloton, and how they're reacting to that, because they certainly overinflated or inflated to the market requirements that COVID presented to them, and now they're shrinking back. And there's these quite scary headlines on what's happening. But I think for the developer, the day-to-day developer, I don't see anything which is stopping them still being hugely in demand. I mean, if you look at CW Jobs, 2019, 34% of all jobs were in software development. That went up to 36 in 2020, down to 33 in 2021, and it's 29%. But I think there's also other requirements coming in. Information security still very much in demand. Cloud-based skills as well, hugely in demand. So I don't see anything on the horizon at the moment which is saying, suddenly tech skills are out of favor and that they're a redundant skill. I think the only caveat to put on that is, obviously, if there is a really deep recession and that starts to have an impact, then we're looking at a different landscape. But I think that there's a maturity in how we deal with recessions these days. I mean, going back to the 90s, it used to be a massive upheaval and a crisis. Obviously, 2008 was a very big crisis that we had. But I think what companies seem to have learned from that is that you don't panic and get rid of everybody, especially if it's the area that's giving you potentially a competitive advantage. Because the smaller you shrink, the smaller your footprint when you come out of recession. And that creates real problems going forward. So I think that they will be investing in keeping as much tech to keep that competitive advantage for as long as possible. Now, obviously, I don't want to labour the point on the market forces out there with Ukraine and the uncertainty still of COVID, and certainly COVID casting a bit of a fog over the impact of Brexit. But if you look at Brexit, that's still amplifying the skills gap, because there are a lot of people that have returned back during COVID and haven't returned to the UK. This is pretty old news, but that's really coming to the fore now. So many things at play, but the underlying trend is that tech is still hugely in demand. Digital skills are hugely in demand, and companies still can't find these candidates easily. So hence we're seeing the huge salaries. A deep recession, yeah. I mean, I don't think there's anything that any of us can do about that. But I think if we go into somewhat of a recession Q4 or Q1, I think that hopefully it won't be long lasting or not too deep, because we'll manage our way through it. But that's quite a long-winded answer of tech requirements still very high on the agenda in the UK, exacerbated by Brexit. And
There's,
sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. If there is one industry that has shown not only a sense of resilience coming off the back of COVID, but certainly the ability to bounce back up and adapt, it is the tech industry. What is from a job board perspective? What are some things that businesses should be thinking about? Like, I know that potentially there are so many what ifs on the horizon, and certainly no one wants a recession, but it's something that I think businesses need to plan for anyway, regardless of the circumstance we're in.
Yeah.
But what are some of the things that you think businesses should be kind of making moves towards, particularly those who still have ambitious growth plans, and perhaps they've kind of tempered that a little bit, but still want to grow, still want to bring on more people, particularly from an engineering perspective. What kind of advice would you give them?
I think it's the job security, highlighting the job security of your industry sector. And let's remember, we're not just talking about tech companies. We're talking about a company that requires digitalization or digital skills. And if you have long-term security within that role, that could be very attractive to some candidates that are maybe thinking, I need a bit of a safer place here. Startups looking a little bit shaky at the moment, as an option. Or if you are a startup and you have that really incredible idea that you're really confident on, really express that, and how that will present a secure role for the developer, for the project team going forward. Because I think that there could be, heightened reservations about jumping ship and going into a company that maybe is a bit more of a risk. And whereas that was kind of standard over the last 12 years, because it doesn't matter if that one goes down, I'll just move elsewhere. People are maybe looking at a rockier outlook. So if they move, maybe they're going to be staying somewhere. And talking about staying within the company, retention, obviously trying to keep your skills on board and keep the team happy, in terms of benefit, in terms of expressing what your social mission is, and how you're kind of helping the greater society. And because that is becoming, well, it is hugely important, particularly to the Generation Z, and keeping that as a real focus, and not swerving from that, and making it a real mission, and not just platitudes to either your consumers or to your staff. So I think that those things are really important, but also training. If you can present that you're upskilling your teams, or you have a history of upskilling your teams, that's really attractive as well, because it means that someone's not going to a job just because it's secure, knowing they're not going to advance their skills for 2 or 3 years, but they know that within that they will be treated as an ongoing concern in terms of requiring training, requiring mentoring, requiring uh, real direction and leadership from that company as well. So they're not just stultifying within a company for the sake of security. So I think those things could be really, really attractive to candidates at the moment, and present a real opportunity to get people that are maybe used to working in a very tech focused or tech industry to maybe diversifying and moving out for something a little bit more secure. I think also highlighting the point of remote working and your commitment to remote working. I think that there's now a bit of a suspicion of will this last, or will they change their mind? Because we all remember that flipped very quickly in COVID. It had to.
Yeah.
But is there a concern that it might flip back because a recession, maybe that gives a little bit more control to the employer and they can dictate the working environment, whereas at the moment the candidates, the applicants are to a greater extent dictating the work environment to the employers, because that's the competitive market we're in. So several points within that I think are really, really important.
It's really interesting you bring up remote working, because certainly what we see at client server is that particularly clients who are almost insistent upon more time in the office than working from home, or offering sort of a lesser remote package, are going right down the list of preferences for candidates. And we look at some of the other companies like Spotify, who introduced that work we want policy, and I think reported in the last couple of weeks that their staff retention rates have never been higher. That kind of that mentality that this was necessary for COVID, but we're just going to kind of slowly get people back to
Yeah.
the way things were. It's almost so stilted in its approach that it will cost businesses in the long run. It feels that that the remote pool isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think what the demands for bringing people back into work does, it exposes maybe a slightly more dictatorial culture within that business, and that is the antithesis of what Generation Z are expecting and wanting for their work environment. And not just Generation Z, but other older generation, millennials and beyond, that have got used to this. Workers my age, for example, that are it's a breath of fresh air,
Yeah.
and to be able to manage their time from home, all the benefits of that, and still enjoy their work. So, from a employee's point of view, particularly in the digital domain, I think there's a desire never to go back to that. What the economy and businesses actually demand may be in conflict with that. And I think if you can manage or build a company that can work really, really effectively and efficiently with remote workers, then you're onto a winning formula, because you will have better retention. You will have a greater pool of candidates potentially to choose from. And those benefits could outweigh what your suspicion is in terms of efficiency or productivity of having people in the office. So yeah, I think that there is not just the outward message of no, we want you in the office, but it's the underlying subtext of what that says about the culture of a company, which is a concern to a lot of candidates.
Yeah. Going back to a point you just made earlier about salaries, I think one of the things that we have been talking about in the recruitment space for the last, say, 18 months or so, is that companies that are looking to hire have offered almost crazy amounts of money. And I think, to quote our CEO at Client Server, Nick Bolton, he's talked about that, the idea of some software developers who are on paper maybe 6, maybe 7 out of 10 caliber developers are getting salaries which are 30,000-40,000 pounds a year more than what they were previously getting, and that companies were willing to shell out insane amounts of money just to kind of bolster their teams and get those people in. Is there any kind of sense that I mean, obviously with a potential recession, obviously salaries and that kind of thing will be high on the agenda, but is there a reading from the market that is starting to soften, and that will perhaps not be as high or as crazy as it has been?
Yeah, you'd imagine it to plateau slightly. And I suppose that is the real issue. If there is a recession, and are you potentially exposed because you're, for want of a better word, overpaid is the wrong word, but you your salary exposes you potentially to being a quite quite an attractive cost cutting
Yeah.
um, measure in terms
Mm.
of, well, that development team, we can get rid of that and look at what we're saving. But I think,
Mm.
again, there is a realism from companies that if they are going to maintain what could be giving them their competitive advantage, that is immediately shut down by removing certain developers, or a cost-cutting exercise, which actually hurts you more down the line. But certainly, if there is a deep recession, then that is a potential. You will be potentially exposed. But it's not just on the tech side. I think that um, salaries across the board, be it in sales, be it in finance, and things like that, have been elevated in this rush post-COVID to load up your employees' numbers, and it's not just going to be in tech. That will be an impact of any potential recession down the line anyway. But yeah, potentially some correction coming down the line, but obviously once we pass on candidates and they are placed within companies, we don't really see that inside view. What we know is, and what we focus on, is what candidates want for their next role.
Yeah.
But yeah, just thinking it through, you would imagine there is some risk involved with that,
Yeah.
in having one of these deemed overinflated salaries.
Absolutely. As a job board, you see the sort of the ebb and flow of people applying for roles and the demand there. What kind of numbers are you seeing at the moment? Are candidates still putting themselves forward? Are those numbers still as high as they have been? What's the market's sense there?
It's certainly becoming more costly for us to find those candidates. I mean, our CV database remains a really good place to dig out candidates that, on the passive side, but actually getting those reactive candidates that are looking in the moment, that is becoming very expensive. But there are ways to, and it becomes down to investing more money in candidate attraction. May and June, we have seen, up to 49% increase in developer roles of applications.
Hmm.
So that it does seem as though there is more activity, or more interest in the market than there has been. Some historic lows um, over 2021, because everybody was desperately trying to get hold of these candidates. But there does seem to be either candidates in situ that are looking, or candidates that are currently on the market looking to get into their next role. So definitely an increased appetite from candidates to potentially move jobs.
Hmm.
Um,
Is
but
that sort of more sort of junior mid level? Is there a sort of a noticeable shift
I
across
mean, and
those
our
sectors?
focus being really drilled into the IT candidate database is more on that high level anyway. But we are
Yeah.
certainly seeing more demand from clients of those higher skill leveled and higher pay bracket roles.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think that, whilst we work with help desk and infrastructure, our real focus has always been on that software development project management area. So that's where we are still seeing high demand, but actually managing to extract a lot of candidates from the market to apply and come onto the site and apply for roles, add their CV to the database, and be available for clients such as client server.
Yeah, it's not to sort of imply that big tech are playing a little bit like Chicken Little and saying the sky is falling and everyone will kind of fall into line there. But it sort of strikes me, certainly from what we're seeing at client server, that we're still seeing a high numbers of candidates applying for roles. Certainly, we are still placing roles. We have more than 400 live roles on our website. So there is still a very sort of steady demand, but a sort of cautious of what's happened and what will potentially happen, and sort of wary of the moves that the big players will make, but sort of being realistic in the sense that the tech industry isn't just those main players. And I think there's also being mindful of the fact that a lot of their operations are stateside, as opposed to the way
Yep.
that we're doing here in the UK and in Europe at large. So it's not so much a case that they're wrong and that they're placating their investors by keeping costs down, but it is more a case of scrutinize the market a little bit more, and that actually hiring hasn't fallen off a cliff, and it is steady as we go.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to your point about a lot of it being stateside. It's interesting that Adam Mosseri was talking about coming over to the UK from Instagram and looking at the European market and maybe upskilling that team. So maybe there are cost savings that they think that they can get from the UK that they don't see in the States, or the demands over there, or it's just too fractious over there. So that's a really interesting move. It'd be really interesting to see what he does when he's over there. I know he's by the sound of it a big fan of London, so there's a personal side to it as well. But that could be something quite interesting to see how that evolves. So yeah, I think a lot of it is dictated by America, in the old adage of America sneezes and we all get a cold kind of thing. But I think that you're absolutely right. There's a real differentiation between tech stocks and the billions invested in that, and the simple requirements for a local county council to upskill and make cost savings by digitalizing certain platforms or certain processes, and that's almost a continual requirement. So there's two tiers to it, really. The stuff that needs to people that are behind the curve, or trying to catch up with competitors, or give that competitive advantage in a much smaller environment, compared to people that are, or companies that are dictated a lot by shareholders and what they want from things, and that their entire focus is the tech domain, whereas there's more of an ongoing requirement for smaller companies, companies not involved in builders merchants or something like that, to digitalize and almost use this time to catch up with where maybe areas they were missing out on, and that will drive continued growth, I think, even in the point of a recession. So that's what's underpinning the continuing demand, and the fact that there is still a real dearth of these skills around, and that talent gap, that skills
Absolutely.
gap.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there are a lot of the demand for certainly not demand for certain skills from businesses hasn't dissipated, and perhaps will be a little bit more reticent about hiring at scale, but by all means they're going to continue to hire, and a softening of the market doesn't necessarily mean it's going to bottom out. So I think particularly in the UK, particularly in the tech sector, there is certainly going to be some changes, but the rhythms and the drive to grow is still going to be there. It's certainly what we're seeing at client server, at least.
Yeah, and I think if we look back at 2008, there were doors slammed all over the place. I can remember that week when that really hit, and it was really affecting clients. It was really affecting projects, and they were being shelved left, right, and centre. But then there was a stabilisation quite quickly, and people realised this was their chance to gain some kind of advantage in the market, and started to reinvest in those areas after quite a short period of time. There wasn't like a year of everybody sitting on their hands. It was people thinking, how can we maximise our advantage in this arena? And I think that will still be the case. We saw how quickly the market changed in COVID. If there is a correction in the market, or a deeper recession, I think you will still have companies trying to take advantage of that that marketplace and push where they can really make an impact. So things, I mean, since the arrival of digitalization to such an extent, things move at such pace. It's very, very difficult to second guess how things will go. But certainly, the headline is "Don't panic just yet." I mean, it's stable, absolutely in demand. Brexit is amplifying the requirement for these skills still, and it could be that that Britain can really make some strides within an impacted environment like this.
Absolutely. We're coming close to the end of the episode. Just before we let you go, Dom, this is a question we always tend to ask you whenever we get you on. You have a sense of what the market is and what the demand is, and certainly CW Jobs have produced a good deal amount of research on things that candidates are finding important and things that businesses should be considering when they're positioning themselves as a potential employer. So if you were to give maybe 3 quick takeaways that businesses can latch onto when they're appealing to candidates in a potentially a potential recession market or a softening market, what are the 3 things that businesses should be thinking about in terms of appealing to developers and technologists in general?
Yeah, I think articulating your CSR, your corporate social responsibility, making that a real highlight of what your company is about and how it helps society. I think that's still very important to an increasing amount of candidates as Gen Z, millennials come through. That's become very, very important. I think looking at presenting how secure the environment that they can work in is in terms of job security, and also training. How do you treat your employees in terms of an asset that requires continual attention and upskilling? I think if you can do that, you will become a more attractive proposition to a lot of candidates out there. Obviously, highlighting the tech that you require and the tech that they'll be working with, articulating the challenge that you can bring them into, and that they will be part of, not being dictatorial about you will be doing this, but this is the challenge we have. You could help us in these ways. And obviously looking at how diverse, or explaining how diverse your current workforce is and how diversity is important to you, because I think that that's almost being taken as a given. And I think it's really important we keep that high on the agenda, because it isn't something that's a fashion piece that you bring to the table and then, oh, that's no longer of interest. It's absolutely vital to the lifeblood of a lot of businesses out there to have a diverse workforce, diverse, well, products and services that are usable by a diverse customer base. So I think there's probably 4 or 5 in there, but I think all of these things, which traditionally were not important or secondary, because it was about, this is what you'll be doing. Again, very dictatorial. This is what you'll be doing. These are the skills we want. This is the test you'll be doing, and this is the direction, where it's like, come on board with us. We're a great opportunity, and this is what we do in the world, and these are our values. Articulate those, and I think you will have a wider application base, and that will obviously increase your diversity scores going forward, and create much more interesting products to a wider customer base as well.
Absolutely. A lot of things that businesses can latch onto. A lot of hope out there for candidates as well, that their careers aren't just going to lie in situ. There is potential for growth and development as well, especially here in the UK. Dom, that's all the time we have for this episode of Talking Tech. Thank you so much for your time, and tune in again next month. We will have another episode of Talking Tech. We'll explore another issue shaping the UK tech market. But from me at Client Server, I'm Michael Oliver. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks all. Bye.